Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program 2, where we are currently working on this design, and I kind of want to scrap it. At least significant portions of it. So, I'm going to grab from here, and we're going to ditch all of this. Cool. So something along the lines of that. Now, why is this the root part? Okay, it's not. Cool. Well, we're going to remove that, and we do actually need a heat shield here. This needs to be a large heat shield. That's going to be for Kerbal re-entry, and that is fine. So that's all understood and absolutely okay. What I want to do now is I want to rethink this overall design, as I said. So what we're going to do here is we are going to hop into our fuel tanks. We're going to put in some rather lighter fuel here. So this is going to be something like this. And then we'll put in a nuclear engine here. So let's see here. Nuclear engine is... Why am I apparently blind? This is a deep space Methalox engine. This is a Methalox. This is all under Methalox, of course. We need to go down here. That would help. Okay, so it would be something like this. However, this is going to be incredibly inefficient. 0.12 on Eve. But as we rise up, we can see that goes up very quickly. We hit 1.0 thrust to weight at an altitude of 26,000 meters. So all we have to do is get up to that point, in theory. So from here, we could think about like SRBs. SRBs might be a more efficient way to handle this. So we would have something like this. So we go up to probably 8x symmetry, and then we'd have SRBs be strapped on somewhere around here. This is something that I mentioned at the end of last episode, is going to a design that's somewhat like this. So it would be something like this to lift it off, in theory. We would need to have some aerodynamic nose cones on this, for sure. Like that. Then, we'd probably want to have re-entry points. There's no attachment point down here. So I wonder if these SRBs would survive re-entry. That's an interesting question. We would need to have a large decoupler here, or at least a medium decoupler here. No, I think a large decoupler is the way to go. So a large decoupler down here, and then we would need a heat shield here for sure. And we'll need to test if these would have any sort of survival in re-entry environments. Also, I think they're going to have to be moved out a little bit further. So before we do anything there, I want to put in some struts here. And I would like to move this up to 8x symmetry. There we go. We're just going to need to space these out a little bit more because it's going to be a whole thing on Eve. So we're going to do something like that. Now then, I want to replace the air brakes that we had before because that's going to be relatively useful for us. And I also want to, let's see, we put our... Where do we put that SAS controller? This isn't it, is it? No, it is. That is it. Okay. That should be absolutely fine then. So what I want to do is I want to put in some air brakes here. And this is going to be in 8x symmetry. We're going to put an air brake here. Here. And also over on this side. Like that. That's a little too high. About there. Okay, so something like that, in theory. So air brakes there. We've got a heat shield down here, although we don't right now. We should definitely put one in. So we've got a heat shield here. And the question is, will this even lift off? So if we were to merge all of these together, and this heat shield, yeah, that's fine. If we were to merge all of that together, would this lift off? So we need to go to Eve. Well, that's inauspicious. 1.36 in the vacuum. Ooh. So it's 0.1 at sea level. That's unexpected. I wonder if that's accurate. Let's run a quick test here. So we're going to grab these strut connectors here. I need to strut these together. And we're going to do a quick re-entry, or rather a quick entry test into Eve. I don't think that's going to go very well, but we're going to run a quick test there, and then I want to run a surface test at Eve. And I don't know how that's going to go. I'm not sure that I trust that this is actually 0.1. I don't necessarily think that this would be a positive thrust to weight ratio, but I think it should be a little higher than 0.1. So let's save this for now. And I'm going to save this as the Eve lander. I'm going to overwrite this. Yes. And we're going to put this out on the pad, and we're going to put this into a simulated position over Eve. Again, we're not too concerned about the electricity situation here, so it's interesting that it didn't save that the electrical charge was infinite. Okay, we're not too interested in the electricity component of this right now. So that seems good. Let's go ahead and put this over Eve. So we'll go here. There we go. And then we're going to be looking to have this be not in orbital mode, but surface mode, but at maximum altitude. There we go. That'll work. No speed, and I don't care about the latitude or longitude. Let's just teleport this for now. Okay, that looks good. Now, we're going to put this into, as soon as we load in, we're going to put this into retrograde. There we go. And I also want to extend all of our air brakes. So we'll deploy these guys. We'll deploy any of these that we can find. So there should be a set of air brakes over here. It's very dark, but we'll deploy that, and then these over here as well. Okay. I don't really like how dark it is. Yeah, we're definitely, like, exactly on the dark side right now. It's not necessarily ideal, but this will give us, in theory, the information that we need. So we can see that our orbital velocity is coming up, and we're entering this quite slowly. Like, this is not a very realistic test here. I want to be clear about that. In reality, we'd be coming in at orbital velocity, which would mean there would be more air between us and the ground, but it would also mean it would also mean that there would be more speed to get rid of. So that is all relatively fine. I'm just noting our orbital velocity right now. The question is, do we lose attitude with this design, and do these SRBs burn off? That'll be important information, but we know that the SRBs are likely not going to be useful. So that is certainly noted. Okay, so we're currently up to about 1 kilometer per second. There we're starting to see heating really coming in. Okay, we're losing attitude. I'm not surprised about this. Okay, we're having bits burn off. I believe that was not the SRB, but rather I believe that this was one of those struts. Okay. So obviously that was catastrophic, but that gave us some interesting information. We're actually kind of close to that being functional. So let's head back to the VAB, which was always expected that we were going to revert that. And that gave us some interesting information there for sure. Actually, reverting to the VAB, I should have reverted to launch there because I wanted to put that on the surface of Eve just to test to see if that 0.1 thrust to weight was real. If it is, then we're going to have to rethink this design. But I want to find out. This design would be plenty on Kerbal, for sure. But let's see what it would be like on the surface of Eve. So we're going to place this at an altitude of just 10, I think. Actually, I'm going to place it at an altitude of 0 on Eve. Okay, this is going to be on the dark side of Eve, understood. But I want this to be just in the water here. Actually, this is on land? Okay. That's fine. So now all we want to do is we want to see if this lifts off the ground. I don't expect it to, but I want to know if that's particularly accurate. So we're going to do that. And then we are going to fire these engines. Yeah, this is about what I expected to see. Okay, so that does indicate that the thrust to weight is at least below 1.0. We don't know exactly if it's accurate at 0.1, but it's definitely well below 1.0. No doubt about that. Let's let this continue to burn for a moment. Okay, it's definitely significantly below 1.0. That's good to know. So it's probably a trustworthy thrust to weight ratio then. I just didn't expect that to be the case with these SRBs. So let's head back to the VAB then. And we are going to check for whatever we have that's the highest sea level thrust to weight. Because we're going to need a lot of thrust to return from Eve. No doubt about that. Dumb question. But what if we were to use jet engines for that initial liftoff? That's an intriguing concept, actually. So if we ditch these, and we went into our fuel tanks, we'd be looking for, not methalox, but just methane here. And if we were to go for, like, this is probably massively overkill. If we were to go for something like these, right? Very, very tiny engines here. And this should be in 8x symmetry. I don't think this is going to give us the thrust to weight that we need here, but it's an interesting question. Can we get lifted off with jet engines? It's going to be a lot less mass, too. So that is definitely interesting. We can put an air intake up on top of these, like that. And then we can put a jet engine. Whatever the highest jet engine that we have at 1 atmosphere is. So this is 20 kilonewtons. This is 120, 85. This is the largest jet engine that we have here. It's hilariously large. Does this have its own air intake? It does. So we can ditch this air intake. How does it actually attach? Its attachment point is... Oh, it's a radial mount. Okay. So it would be something kind of like that. So this thrust to weight on Kerbal would be 3.01. It would run for 11 minutes and 26 seconds, which would be sufficient in theory. But what would this be on Eve? 1.77? Hang on. This might actually work. That's very interesting. We could toss in some extra fuel for it, which would end up being something like that. This is still saying, okay, 22 minutes and 52 seconds. That should be more than sufficient, although that did drop our thrust to weight a fair amount. Honestly, 11 minutes should be more than enough to get us to altitude. We combine these together. Okay. So this is a really weird looking design. There's no doubt about that. I have no idea if this would survive re-entry. We might need to set up some very, very fancy heat shields for it because there's no hit detection. No, that's not what I'm looking for. There's no attachment point down here. This is an interesting concept, though. 1.88 thrust to weight. Jet engines might be the way to go here. So obviously, we're going to want to tip over with this. I want to lower these a fair amount, so we're going to lower them as low as we can. In theory, it would allow us to put them, like, down here. I'm going to put it about here or so. Okay, so something like that. Now, we're going to need to do a little more work on that. I have no idea what this re-entry profile is going to look like. It's probably not great, would be my guess. But let's put this out on the pad and see what the liftoff looks like on this. This is a kind of wild design. No doubt about that. And let's just take this right on over to Eve at 0 altitude. It's going to want to tip over. I'm 99% certain that this is going to want to tip. Because we know that this is going to be at a slight incline here. Yeah. So that's obviously not ideal. This location is not great. Let's revert that back to the launch, and I'm going to just choose a different location on Eve at random. Hopefully this will be in the light and in the Explodium. Because in the Explodium, we should be absolutely fine, in theory. So we use the jet engines to lift us off, right? And that should mean, actually, that we would do this number. We would lift off with the jet engines. And we're tipping over here. Okay. Yeah, this is obviously fairly expected that we're going to be tipping over. Okay, I'm just going to choose a kind of random location, and we'll teleport before we have any issues here. Okay. The atmosphere on Eve doesn't count as air. Or we weren't moving fast enough for the air intake to actually function. Regardless, we didn't get moving before we ran out of air intake. No intake air available. Intake is enabled. So I'm guessing that the core issue here, and let me revert this back to the launch. I'm guessing that the core issue here is, in fact, that we don't have air on Eve. So the thing there is that the air intake is oxygen, right? And I believe Eve's air is carbon dioxide. So that's the likely issue there. So this is fine. I'm going to try this one more time with the hydrogen engine on just to see if movement was the issue. I don't think it was. Yeah, no. So that's not going to work. We're going to have to go back to the drawing board. We'll need oxidizer. Okay. So that is noted. This liftoff stage is going to be very complicated. Very complicated indeed. I do like the idea of having the hydrogen once we get a bit higher in the atmosphere. So that's nice and effective. That's efficient. It is going to definitely work. But we need to rethink our actual liftoff portion of this. So, to that end, we can always go back to good old Methylox. Methylox is heavy, and it's difficult to get it there. But I don't really see another option at this point. We've investigated SRBs. SRBs are not doing the trick. We've investigated jet engines. That's not going to do it. We don't need to investigate monoprop. Monoprop isn't going to do it. Xenon, no, that's not going to be a thing. And hydrogen, we know that its atmospheric pressure is problematic, right? So that's fine. That means that we need to go with Methylox. That's the only real option. So the biggest engine that we've got is Mammoth 2s. That's a large size. So we can go with a large fuel tank here, and that would end up being like this guy. Like this. So that should be reasonably fine. Then we would look to put in some fuel up top. Okay, that's definitely not the one that I'm looking for. We can go for an adapter here, but we're going to have to be worried about weight, right? So I think that we're going to... we previously determined that we needed to just put on a nose cone, and that's fine. We wanted to have the radial decoupler on here in ATEX symmetry. And then we did need to have the... we needed to have the extension here. We just didn't have enough space without it. So that's going to end up going like this. There we go. And then these guys... okay, that's kind of weird, but whatever. These guys are going to get attached in like that. Okay, so that's fine for now. This would all be strutted together. And the question is, this would have 2.36 thrust to weight at Kerbal. I don't think that this is going to have enough at Eve. Actually, 1.39 in the vacuum. In the atmosphere, not so much. Okay, so Mammoth 2s, I think, are not the way to go here. I think we might have to end up going with Vectors. Vectors are lower thrust to weight, but they're also much smaller, so we're going to carry less fuel with us. We just need to get this thing up high enough, right, to be able to get it into the position where the hydrogen tanks can take over. Where's this spot? I know there's a spot here somewhere. There it is. Okay, so something like this, in theory. I'm not sure how long these vectors would burn for here, but something like that. And then we can have a fuel adapter. That would be something like, well, we actually don't need one. We can only put in a small nose cone here. So it'd be something like this. These are very powerful, but they're not going to burn very long. This is 58 seconds of burn, and that's only 0.95 thrust to weight. Let's slot in the hydrogen tank as well. That brings it up to 0.99 thrust to weight. So what that ends up meaning is that we need a second group of these. So that's going to end up being... We're going to have to turn off the snapping here on the angle. I want the angle snap turned off. So, center of mass, yeah. This is a symmetry mode. I want to turn the snapping off, thank you very much. I want it to be halfway in between here, which apparently isn't an option. So, other alternate methods of doing this. There are some. What we can do is we can go into our struts here, and we can do something like this. So what I would do is I would take, like, this guy out over here. This is maybe a little long, so I'd be going for these guys, and I do want snapping on for this. So we'd have this go out here, and then we'd do, like, one more. Approximately like that. It's not ideal. And then from here, I would like to do one additional. And then we would attach another set of these right up over here. Like that. So that essentially doubles this. And what does that do to our thrust to weight? Now, we're only going to run this for a little bit, right? This is 58 seconds of burn time. That's 1.07 thrust to weight. Okay. Let's remove some of this fuel. I think we're over-fueled at this point. And what does that do to our thrust to weight? Just waiting on this to update. 1.32. It's not great. I don't think that this is going to get us up high enough, to be honest. So we can definitely increase the number of these stacks here. We can take this over to here, like so. And we can put in a stack, in theory, here. And then a stack, in theory, about here. Or so. These are going to have to be strutted together, for sure. And I would want to grab this guy here and move it over a little bit to be about here or so, perhaps. This is very strange looking, no doubt about it. It's kind of a unfortunate symbol that is forming there. Luckily, there's too many arms, so that is good. And we are going to create ourselves a strut connector here, and we need to strut all of these together. Okay, so it'll be something like this. There we go. And then this out over here as well. Cool. And then I'd like to make sure that these are strutted in here. Cool. So that'll end up being something like this. Now, I have no idea how well we're going to actually handle the re-entry here. That's going to be very interesting for sure. We'll strut all of that together about like that. It's a giant mess. And that puts us at... If we move these 24 in here, this is at Eve 0 kilometer. This is claiming 1.37 thrust to weight. Let's see if it's enough to get us up into orbit. This has nothing to do right now with our landing procedure. We just want to get this thing on the ground and see what this looks like. It's not going to be pretty, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so let's move this right on over. It is Alt F8 in this game, and we're going to teleport over. If I recall correctly, it's still dark where we chose here, but that's fine. Okay, And now the question is, can we get into orbit from here? We'll find out. Our vessel's out of communication range, but we have full control. I don't know what's going on with that, but whatever. Maybe we have Kerbals in here. Yeah, Valentina's in here. Sure. Also, our electric charge is not infinite. Okay, it was both off and on. Sure, we'll turn it on. We don't care about the electric charge right now. We will address that later. For the time being, we just want to see if we can get this thing into orbit. And, I mean, this is very polar here, but that's fine. So we're just going to launch here. Yeah, let's do it. We're going to put it into an up vector for now. We want as much altitude as we can get for the moment. It gets us off the ground. There's no doubt about that. But does it get us enough altitude for the hydrogen engine to take over? That's the question. We run the vectors for about a minute here in total. We're swaying around. We're moving at about 100 meters per second right now. Apoapsis needs to cross 26 kilometers by the time we run out of fuel for our vectors. That's our target point. So we'll see if this works. And then we'll start dialing in on our landing procedure, and then we'll need to figure out how we deliver this thing to Eve. That'll be the next question. So we're currently at about 3 kilometers altitude with an apoapsis of about 6 kilometers altitude. Okay, our speed is definitely working its way up. However, our fuel is getting a lot lower. But the air is getting thinner and thinner. And we're going to push a fair amount through the atmosphere here. No doubt about it, but will it be enough? That's the question. 10 kilometer apoapsis. Cool. We're seeing an overheat on our docking port. That is noted. We'll keep an eye on that. Losing attitude a little bit here. Okay. So, 16 kilometer. We lose the docking port. Okay, that didn't go very well. That didn't go very well at all. So, it's clear that that lifts us off the ground, but that does not deliver us into a usable position. So that means we need more. Okay, we can definitely do that. Back to the VAB we go. We can get more. And I'll show you how we're going to get more. So, what we're going to do is we're going to give ourselves more space. Cool. So, we're going to hop back into the VAB here. And honestly, what we need isn't necessarily more thrust. Thrust wasn't the problem there. The problem was that we need more burn time, specifically. So, I'm content with the level of thrust. But we definitely need more burn time, and more burn time does actually mean more thrust. So, what we're going to do is we're going to take this up to 8x symmetry. We're going to pop all of these off. And we're going to put in another one of structure. Here we go. We're going to put in another one of these. So that means that we're going to put that there. And then we're going to come grab this guy. And he is going to go here, but of course, in the opposite direction. Okay. Something kind of like this, and that gives us a lot more space to work with. Now, this is a little too high. It's fine. I'm not too concerned about it. That's not what I wanted it to do at all. Undo that. Undo this as well. Undo this. There we go. This is where I wanted this to be. I want to be in rotate and translate mode. Okay, so we're going to bring this guy down to about here or so. Cool. And now what we can do is we can duplicate these lads. Like so. So we duplicate them, and we look to put them right over here. We're going to need to rotate this a little bit. What direction are we rotating it? Not like that, that's for sure. This definitely takes a moment to calculate this rotation. Okay, it's going to be rotated about like this, I think. Except that this is still rotated the wrong way in this regard. Okay, we want this to just attach on. I'm going to delete that for now. We want this to just attach on right over here, right? So I want to rotate it like this, I think. Yes, like this. Then it just gets attached like that. Okay, cool. This is very strange looking, no doubt about it, but we have lots of space in here that we can attach other boosters as well. This is getting increasingly monstrous. There's no doubt about that. Increasingly monstrous. So we can put these in here. And that puts our thrust to weight at 1.41. But I'd like to add in additional fuel here, because we don't actually want our thrust to weight to get up too high here. We want to keep our thrust to weight low, but long burning, so we don't have those overheat issues. So I'm going to toss in another one of these Methalox engines for each one of these positions. So something like this. And we'll see what that puts it at. Okay. So something like that, in theory. That puts us at 1.35, but with longer burn time, in theory. In theory. We'll let that update. 1.14. Okay, that is definitely longer burn time. So now what we can start doing is we can start duplicating these guys and putting them in here. Like that. So we can put in 1, 2, and 3, in theory, like this. And that, of course, is going to be a lot more in terms of thrust to weight, in theory. I'm not sure if these are thrust to weight positive or neutral, though. Okay, so this is showing currently 3.91 thrust to weight. I'm not sure that that's accurate. Okay, 1.15 thrust to weight. That's a bit more like it. So this is insane, obviously. No doubt about it, this is completely and totally insane, and I kind of hate it. But we're going to test it next episode. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Atala, Ali Lee, Dark Horse, Xenocyte, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, The Lounge STL, Kentogan, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.